Merry Christmas, everybody. Hi, I'm Phileas Steyn and I'm the Safari Expert. And thank you so much for tuning into this Q&A video where I answer questions you asked on Instagram, Facebook, and the YouTube community page. Now, you'll see this is a long video, so make yourself a cup of coffee, strap in, and please watch right to the end of the video. But before I answer your questions, let me just remind you that I'm currently running a special on my wildlife photography for beginners and amateurs online course. So if you're still looking for that perfect Christmas gift, just click on the link at the top of the video description and you'll see that you'll get a 50% discount. Simply click on the Gift This Course button and then type in the email address of who you want to send it to. Right, let's jump in straight to those questions. Now, many of you asked the same or very similar questions, in which case I'll just answer it once, and I'm really going to try my best to answer all of them. And know that somewhere in between all of these answers, I'll answer the million-dollar question that so many of you have been asking, namely, what camera gear do I use to make my videos? But let's start at question number 1. So someone asked, what is your favorite national park in Africa or the rest of the world? Now, this is quite a tricky one for me to answer because I've been to so many amazing places. And, you know, sometimes someone will ask me this week and I'll say it's the Kalahari Transfrontier Park. But if someone asks me next week, it'll be PUNGWE National Park. And it's just because, well, I change my mind depending on how I feel on the day. But as I sit here today, I can honestly say that one of my favorite game reserves in Africa is MAASAI Game Reserve in Botswana. It's not the best known reserve because it kind of is tucked in the eastern tip of Botswana, quite far away from famous places like the Okavango Delta or the central Kalahari. But what makes MAASAI so amazing is the fact that the reserve is very open and you can also off-road. So game viewing opportunities are excellent. But what I like about it most is the fact that during the dry season, which is sort of typically from May to October, it's very dry and dusty and makes for some excellent dramatic photographs. But in summer, so from November to about the end of March, if it rains a lot, the whole reserve transforms when the little devil's thorn flowers come into bloom and the whole place is carpeted in yellow, and it makes for some very, very unique scenes and especially photographs. Now, if we talk about the rest of the world, I must admit I haven't been to many national parks outside of Africa, but certainly one of my favorite is Ranthambore National Park in India, where I've gone to photograph tigers 3 times before. Definitely one of the favorite safaris I've ever done. Now, the next question is, what is the best country for safaris and landscapes, Botswana or South Africa? Well, I think Botswana is better for safaris. I just like the wilderness feel there. If you go to places like Moremi, Kwai, or Savuti, or even the central Kalahari, for me, it feels much wilder than, say, the Sabi Sands or the Kruger National Park, which is the more famous safari destinations in South Africa. When it comes to landscapes, though, I think South Africa is a little bit better. Places like the Drakensberg or down in the Cape where you've got the Cedarburg and Table Mountain or the Flat Karoo, there's some beautiful, beautiful places to take landscape photographs. So I would say if you want to do safaris, go to Botswana. If you want to do landscapes, come to South Africa. If you're looking for best of both, go to Namibia. The next question is, which lodges in the Kruger area are best to stay at on a budget, specifically for photography purposes? So many of you have asked me to please make some recommendations of places to stay that are not that expensive around the Kruger area. Now, the harsh reality is if you want to get regular Big 5 sightings of relaxed animals where you can off-road, in other words, the best possible chances for wildlife photos, it's not going to be cheap. Now, these are places like the Timbavati, Manyeleti, and the Sabi Sands. There are lots of other little camps in the area, but the reality is their restrictions are often either the fact that you can't off-road, or the concessions are very small, or just there aren't many animals there, or often those animals are a little bit shyer, basically. So I wish I had sort of a perfect answer for you, but I just think that sort of perfect lodge that's cheap and has excellent sightings doesn't really exist. But what I can say is there's a little camp in the Manyeleti called PUNGWE Safari Camp that I often visit, which has very basic accommodation, sort of basic safari tents with a donkey boiler. The camp is unfenced and it only sleeps 8 people, but it's still full board, so you still get all your meals and your game drives. And their prices really are very reasonable considering where they are and the kind of sightings that you can get. So PUNGWE Safari Camp is definitely a great option. It's in the southern Manyeleti, which is open to the Sabi Sands, Kruger and Timbavati, and it's also located in a very good game viewing area in the Manileti, and you can also off-road there. So go and check out PUNGWE Safari Camp. I'll link to it in the video description. And another great place that I can highly recommend visiting, especially for a group of friends or family that want to self-cater, is ANTARES Bush Camp in the Greater Kruger. They might not have a massive concession or the kind of game viewing that you have in the Manileti Game Reserve, but what they do have is a wonderful underground hide and waterhole that attracts things like lions, leopards, elephants, and general game, where you can photograph them at eye level. Definitely a place to check out and good value for money as well. Right, the next question. What is the best sighting you've ever seen in any game reserve? My goodness, that's like asking me what's my favorite lint ball. It's almost impossible to answer. But I think it will have to be a sighting of a big male leopard called Tingana, which I saw in the Sabi Sands. And when we came across him, he was busy pulling a python out of a tree. Now, this python had apparently been killed by a honey badger and was kind of hoisted into a tree by this honey badger. And when the leopard came across it, it was trying to tug it out of the tree. And it took a while, but eventually it kind of climbed into the tree, grabbed the python, let go, and its weight kind of yanked it out of the tree. And then it walked away with it to hoist it in an even bigger tree. So definitely one of my most memorable sightings and some of the best photographs I was ever able to take. The next question is, if you did, what subjects did you take at university? Well, I did go to university. I studied at a place called the Botswana University of Technology in Pretoria here in South Africa. And my diploma was in nature conservation, where our subjects were things like plant studies, animal sciences, resource management, geology, ecology. It was just an absolutely wonderful course to prepare me for this sort of wildlife industry that I'm in at the moment. I also carried on and did my bachelor's and master's degrees, and my master's specifically focused on leopard movements. And as I said earlier, I did that in Mashatu Game Reserve in Botswana. The next question is, how can we avoid the trophy hunting scene, and can you visit South Africa with a good feeling? Now, there's many tourists that don't ever want to support the trophy hunting scene when they visit South Africa on a safari. And I totally understand this. The harsh reality is that trophy hunting does still happen on many game reserves. So the best way to avoid that is to visit one of South Africa's national parks. So visit the SANPARKS website, which I'll link to in the video description, and choose one of any of our 20 plus national parks, like the Kruger National Park, the Kalahari Transfrontier Park, Addo Elephant National Park. And you know that if you visit one of those national parks, there won't be any trophy hunting taking place. If you do want to visit a private game reserve, just email the lodge and ask them whether trophy hunting happens on their reserve or not. The next question is, who's going to win the 2023 Rugby World Cup? Smiley face. Well, I'll be honest with you, I think the Springboks stand a good chance after this end of year tour where we beat England convincingly in that last game. I think things are looking good. New Zealand certainly aren't at their best. Australia aren't at their best. And I do think we've got what it takes to beat the Irish and the French as well. So yeah, I'm going to go Springboks for the win. Did you make a video about TULI a couple of days ago? Well, I didn't make a video about TULI a couple of days ago, but a couple of weeks ago, I was at TULI Wilderness in Botswana. So maybe you saw something that I posted on that on social media. Which leads me to the next question, which is, could you recommend any private lodges that don't break the bank? Now, some of you might think, but didn't you just answer that a little while ago? But this is different because these are private lodges anywhere, not just around the Kruger National Park. And this one place that I just mentioned, TULI Wilderness in Botswana, is definitely one of the best places to visit, and it certainly doesn't break the bank. So go and check out the link that I've added in the video description about TULI Wilderness and their two camps, namely Sorolo and Mojave. In fact, I'll link to my Mojave video above that'll show you exactly what you can expect from this amazing little bush camp. Now, what makes TULI Wilderness so incredible is the fact that you feel like you're the only people in the world. They've got a massive concession and very few vehicles around, and excellent game viewing as well. And it's just the most incredible landscape with beautiful open plains, rocky outcrops, and this wonderful place called Eagle Rock that you can hike up onto and look over the Motleotsi River. And when I was there just the other day, we actually had 2 Veros eagles fly right up above us and look down upon us. They were kind of hovering above us, and it was certainly one of the sort of highlight safari experiences of 2022 for me. The next question is, have you got any footage of the lions on the other side of the fence in the Hoedspruit Wildlife Estate? So for those of you that don't know, I live in a place called the Hoedspruit Wildlife Estate. We border the greater Kruger National Park, and sometimes we see things like lion and elephant and rhino on the other side of the fence, and some of the animals even come into the estate, like the leopards. Now, I haven't yet seen the lions on the other side of the fence, but I did hear that earlier this week they were seen close by. I do, however, regularly hear them calling. The next question is, what is the most difficult animal to photograph? Well, many of you will think it's probably something shy like a leopard, or maybe something you don't often see like, I don't know, porcupines or whatever. But for me, one of the most difficult animals to photograph are actually buffalo. And I think it's the fact that they are sort of large and stocky and, the dark color. And then often in a big herd where there's lots of other animals photobombing it in the background. And it's also difficult to focus on a specific individual when there's so many other ones of them moving in front of you. So I've always found buffalo very, very difficult to photograph. So when I find a herd of buffalo, what I often do is I try and either look for things like oxpeckers sitting on them, which adds a little bit of color, or I try and focus on specific individuals and really try and capture the sort of the character on their faces, because each buffalo looks very different if you look very closely. I also love photographing buffalo in backlight when it's quite dusty. So if you find a herd of buffalo and they might be walking or running through the dusk, always try and photograph into the sun so you can get some lovely color. How can I get involved in conservation and working with reserves as a teenager? Oh, it's a difficult question to answer because I suppose it depends on your context specifically. I remember when I was a teenager, I just wanted to get into the bush all the time. And the only way that I could really do that was, to go to the Kruger National Park with my folks, which is definitely a good way to do it. But I was lucky enough that friends of friends owned a game lodge and they invited us there. And when I kind of hit it off with the owner, he invited me to come back during all my school vacation time. And I obviously took him up on his offer and went through every single time I had a chance to spend some time in the bush and to learn more about the safari industry. So that was really a contact that we had sort of in our little family circles. But what I can highly recommend is that you join any kind of clubs that you can, whether it's a club at your school, like a wildlife photography club or a nature club or a hiking club or anything to do with nature, or to get involved with, groups online. So whether it's a Facebook page or a group on Instagram or WhatsApp or whatever it might be. I'm thinking of the young photographers that have this wonderful group that I've seen on WhatsApp and online. Just try and find out what other young people are doing and how you can get involved with them. And then definitely consider actually studying something in that line. So my nature conservation diploma that I did and spoke about earlier, even though I've never been asked to use that as a professional, so in other words, no one's ever asked me what I've studied, but the contacts that I made throughout that period was invaluable. And I bump into those people on a regular basis when I'm out in the field, at the moment. So definitely considering actually studying something like nature conservation, ecotourism, becoming a field guide, something like that is definitely worthwhile. I really hope that all you youngsters watching will keep the passion and not be convinced to study something just for the money. I obviously totally understand that, but perhaps your parents or your teachers might say you have to become a vet or a doctor, a lawyer, or something like that if you want to have a good life. But I absolutely encourage you to live your passion and follow your dreams, and get involved in the nature, safari and tourism industry, because there definitely is a good life out there for you. The next question is the Kalahari just as good as Kruger for leopard sightings? The answer is no, it's not. The Kalahari can be really, really tough for leopards. I know some people who have had to visit 7 or 8 times before they even saw their first leopard there. Now, the reason for this is because the resources that leopards need, like prey, water, cover, den sites, are few and far between in the Kalahari. Whereas in Kruger, they have that in abundance. So there, you'll have leopard densities that are some of the highest in the world in the Kruger National Park. Whereas in the Kalahari, one male leopard could cover as much as 200,000 hectares looking for females and prey and water and things like that. So I think it's another thing as well that in the Kalahari, you only really have 2 main roads to drive. Whereas in the Kruger, you've got, just hundreds of roads to choose from. So you're covering a lot more of the park when you go on game drive. So in Kalahari, even though you can see leopards, I wouldn't go there specifically for leopards, except if you really want a challenge. In fact, I wouldn't even go there just for lions. I always go to the Kalahari for smaller things like meerkats and ground squirrels, or looking for rarer animals like brown hyenas and Cape foxes. And the big cats, including leopards, are just a bonus. I'll say this though, that there are ways to increase your chances of finding leopards, and I'll link to that video above. I actually made a video to give you tips on how to find leopards in the Kalahari, and I'll leave it for you to go and check out that video, and hopefully you'll see one on your next visit there. What is your best sighting of 2022? Oh, this was a bumper year, and I had some incredible sightings. I just got back from Malawi, where we actually saw some wild dogs kill a young hartebeest calf. And even though it was quite hard to watch, it definitely was one of the best of the year. I'm not going to show that to you right now because it's a little bit gory. But I think, if I'm honest, my best sighting was probably the lions I saw drinking at Zimanga's hide, one of the overnight hides, in, I think it was March this year. I was sitting alone in the overnight hide. I think it was the Tambueti overnight hide, and sat awake the whole night on my own, saw hardly anything. And then just about as my session came to an end, a lioness, 2 lionesses in fact, arrived with 2 cubs, and they drank, well, it was about 4 meters away from me. So yeah, just the most unbelievable experience, and some amazing photos I was able to get as well. So go and check out my video about Zimanga if you want to see exactly what happened there. The next question is, how did you start overlanding? So those of you that have been following the channel would have seen some of my overlanding series, like the Botswana trip 2021 and this year Botswana trip 2022. Overlanding is basically jumping in your own 4x4 and then just traveling, throughout, in my case, Southern Africa, and camping in some wonderful wild places. And it happened for me as a child. I think I remember for the first time going overlanding, I think when I was about probably 14 or 15 years old. My dad bought a 4x4 and put some rooftop tents at the top and bought a big trailer at the back. And we went to Botswana and we visited places like Moremi, Savuti, and I just instantly fell in love. I love nothing more than just packing the bare minimum and going to the wildest places I can find in Botswana, and then just camping under the stars. There's something about not having a fence around you and just being in the wilderness. So yeah, it started as a kid. I did it with my family, and then later when I was able to do so, I bought my own 4x4. And for many years, I was a travel writer for local South African travel magazines. And my wife and I visited some of the wildest reserves in Southern Africa. Just me and my bucky, as we call it here in South Africa. Yeah, we basically wrote articles about these wild places. And for 8 years, we were overlanding to, like I said, some of the wildest places around. So it's something that I'm hoping to continue doing for as long as I possibly can. And I'll obviously try and share as much of that with you here on the Safari Expert YouTube channel. Right, let's jump to the next question. And that is again about overlanding. And it's, which sections of Botswana are accessible for soft-roader 4x4s? Now, a soft-roader, I'm assuming, is something that maybe doesn't have low range and maybe is a little bit lower than, say, my Toyota Prado. Now, unfortunately, some of the wildest places in Botswana, like the central Kalahari, Mabua Sehube, Moremi, Savuti, Kwai, Chobe, the sand can get very, very thick there, and you definitely will need low range from time to time. And it can get very muddy as well when it rains. So if you've got a sort of a raised 2x4 or a low 4x4, I would stick to areas like, driving the main roads and then just popping into places like Nata Bird Sanctuary, or maybe go to Gweta or Elephant Sands, maybe drive up to Kasane where you can camp somewhere in and around Kasane and then just do day trips into Chobe or take boat rides onto the Chobe River. But be very careful. Don't go into, deep into the bush where there's a good chance of getting stuck. In that case, I would highly recommend just renting a 4x4. Contact a company like Drive Botswana. I'll link to them in the video description, and let them organize the trip for you, including getting you a proper 4x4. But there are ways to do it. But yeah, stick to the main roads, stick to the main towns and cities, and just explore from there. The next question is, what is your favorite camp in Kruger? Again, this is almost like asking me what's my favorite reserve. It will change from day to day. But I think my favorite camp is BERG-en-DAL in the far south. What I love about it so much is game viewing is exceptional. You can literally see all and any of the big five on any drive. And the landscape is incredible. It's the only place in the park where you've got some hills and mountains. And, I really like that scenery and sort of what it does for the feeling of the drive, and especially for photographs as well. And it's an excellent area for leopards. And I think that's probably part of the reason why I like it so much. The next question also has to do with Kruger, and that is, when will you be making more videos about Kruger? And this is literally the question I got asked most. So, as a lot of you will know, I've done a series of videos on the camps of the Kruger National Park. I've done BERG-en-DAL, Lower Sabi, Skukuza, Satara, Orpen, Olifants, Letaba, and Singwedzi. But there's obviously quite a few that I still need to do, and I'll be honest with you, this year was just so busy, I just didn't get time. But my wife keeps on telling me, book Kruger trips. And I'd really love to kind of finish this series by visiting all those camps. So I am very busy with photographic safaris and other work the first 3 months of 2023. So it won't happen soon, but I do hope to visit some of those camps and make more videos sort of towards the middle of next year. Here's a good question. What is your favorite photo you've ever taken? Jeepers. That's impossible to answer. I don't know what to say. You know what? It would have to be the elephants drinking under the Milky Way that I took at ANTARES bush camp, which I mentioned earlier. It's a photo that took me well over a year to take because I had to go back so many times to, be in the hide at the right time. And I think what made this shot so difficult is there were lots of things that the stars had to align, if you excuse the pun, because I had to be in the right place at the right time. So you have to go, during new moon. The weather had to play along with no clouds. You had to take the photo at the right time of the night when the Milky Way sits correctly. You had to have elephants come in, and you had to have the right settings. So it's just, it was a really tricky one to get, but eventually, I was able to get this shot. And it's actually 2 photographs, one of the stars and one of the elephants that I just overlay. But I literally took the shot sort of seconds apart. I photographed the Milky Way with the hide light switched off. And as I switched back on the lights, the elephants arrived. And then I took some photos of the elephants with the light switched on. So yeah, I'd have to say, at the moment at least, that's my favorite photo that I've ever taken. Next question is, what is the best African country for safaris? If you ask me, it's Botswana. Many people would say it's the countries in East Africa like Tanzania and Kenya, just because of the sheer numbers of animals that you find in places like the Serengeti and the Masai Mara. But having been there earlier this year, yes, it's amazing for safaris, but there's lots of other people as well. And for me, that can spoil it to a certain degree, because I kind of like sightings where there's only a few cars, or sometimes even just myself in the sighting. So for that wilderness feel and a little bit more exclusivity and isolation, I would say Botswana definitely is the best. Right, we're getting towards the end. The second last question is, when is the best time of the year for photo safaris? And this is an excellent question, because most people assume or get told by their travel agents that you have to go during the dry season. Now, dry season here in Southern Africa is typically from May to October. It's cooler, there's less bugs around, it's quite dry, so visibility is good, and a lot of animals get attracted to the waterholes. So all of that is, of course, excellent for game viewing, and you can't really go wrong visiting Southern Africa during our winter months. But what I don't like about it is if it's a really dry season, it's very dry and dusty, very dull. You know, your photographs often look very dull, especially if it's a little bit overcast. So I absolutely love doing safaris during our summer months. So from spring onwards, you know, we often get our first rains in October. So November, December, January, and all the way through to April, we have beautiful, lush green scenery, often beautiful flowers. All the migratory bird species arrive, and there's beautiful natural ponds of water all throughout. And often you get wonderful photographs of animals drinking at these little ponds and birds bathing in these ponds. The challenge, though, is it can get very, very hot. It can often reach, 40 degrees Celsius plus. And of course, with that comes the chance of raining out. So we get big thunderstorms, and yeah, those are obvious disadvantages. But I would say if you're not a first-time safari goer, do yourself a favor and come on safari in summer. It's just a completely different look and feel, and simply book a lodge that has air conditioning so you can stay cool during those hot hours of the day. And the last question that I know you've all been dying to know the answer of is, what camera gear do I use to make my videos? So currently my main big camera is a Canon R6. And on that, for wildlife specifically, I use a Canon 100 to 500 millimeter RF lens. Now that's the gear that I use to film the animals that you typically see in my videos. High quality, just makes for those beautiful sort of slow-mo shots, and all the great wildlife footage would have been filmed with those. I do have shorter lenses as well. I have a Canon 16 to 35 millimeter f4 lens, which I'm filming with right now, and also a 24 to 105 f4 lens, but I hardly ever use those for my YouTube videos, apart from ones like I'm doing now where I'm sitting here in the office. Now, the other equipment that I use my iPhone. So this is an iPhone 12 Pro, and I use that for a lot of the sort of shots of the camps that I visit. You would have seen those beautiful crane shots or the panning shots. Sometimes I actually speak to the phone camera as well when I'm out on drive. And I'll stabilize that on a gimbal specifically. Now, a gimbal is something just to help you keep it nice and steady, because if you're filming like this, it's sometimes very hard to keep the horizon straight and, prevent it from wobbling. So the gimbal is very, very important. I've just ordered a brand new DJI Osmo 6, I think it is, that I'll be using. Now, I'll link to all of these pieces of equipment in the video description. Now, another very important piece of equipment that I use is a GoPro Hero 10. And that's great for when I'm walking around talking to the camera. So I'll put it on a little Gorilla Pod, and it's got a media mod around it, which has a little light and a microphone. And it doesn't pick up a lot of wind noise like my cell phone does. So a GoPro is an absolute must. And this Hero 10 is something else. It's got amazing stability, and like I said, the sound quality is incredible. And I'll often pop it sort of somewhere against the window when I drive as well for those nice inside the car shots. And again, the quality of the audio, even when you're driving in bumpy roads and stuff like that, is amazing. So as a content creator, that's absolutely invaluable. And it's obviously also great for some time lapses or any sort of other unique angles that you want, wide angle shots. If you want to put it down at ground level, the GoPro is great. So between the Canon R6 and the 100 to 500 millimeter lens, my GoPro Hero 10 and my iPhone 12 Pro, that's the main equipment that I use. I do have other little things, like at the moment I've got a Rode video mic on my camera. I have a Rode Video Mic Pro as well that I use to record the wildlife sounds with. I've got a tripod, lots of other smaller pieces of equipment. And what you have to remember is that getting that footage is only one part of it. One of the most important pieces of equipment is my MacBook Pro, because it can handle all those, file sizes and, you know, the software on here is very important as well. The Adobe Premiere Pro and the Camtasia that I use, the combination of the two is what allows me to actually create these videos. And believe me when I say, for every hour that I film in the field, I produce an hour as well. So it takes forever to make some of these videos, especially the more sort of complicated ones like an overlanding series where you're not just talking to the camera. So yeah, I really hope that that answers your question, not only regarding the camera, but all your questions that you've asked. I really hope that you've learned a little bit more about me and the Safari Expert YouTube channel, and that one or two of the questions may help you to have a great safari when you next come to Africa. And I'd just like to thank the opportunity, first of all, for all of you that watched all the way up to this end. I really do appreciate it. And just for all the support over the last 3 years. In a couple of weeks' time, the channel will be 3 years old and we'll probably hit 20,000 subscribers around about the same time. And I just want to thank each and every one of you individually for all the support that you've shown. Every minute of every video that you've watched has changed my life, because what it's allowed me to do is to do this almost full time, you know, and to share all these wonderful experiences with you has really been a blessing. So may you all have a very Merry Christmas, a wonderful festive season, but most of all, a successful, productive, and relaxing 2023. Keep an eye on the Safari Expert YouTube channel. There's some wonderful things happening. I'm looking up because I'm looking at my wall calendar, and I see a trip to Manyaleti. I see a trip hopefully to Rwanda and Congo. I see a trip to Botswana, back to Mashatu, a trip down to the Cape. Oh my goodness, just wonderful trips all over. I might even be going to Scotland and the Bahamas. Interesting one. So yeah, it's just absolutely wonderful to share all of it with you. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Click the subscribe button if you haven't done so yet. And please feel free to ask me any other questions you might have in the comments below. Until next time.